Good evening and welcome to the Monomoy Regional School District's budget hearing held in the high school library. This meeting will be broadcasted to Channel 22 as well as live streamed and recorded to the Monomoy Regional School YouTube channel. At this moment, I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:04 p.m. And we will move right into the first item on the agenda, which is the FY24 budget presentation. Everyone's here.
Wait for it. Good evening, School Committee. I'm Michael McMillan, the School Business Manager, and over the next few minutes, I'm going to give you an overview of the budget to date. So one of their statutory requirements, and it's also in the regional agreement, is that we have a public hearing of the budget, and that is this meeting. And really what I'm going to present will be a culmination of some of the things we've been discussing since the fall when we started talking about the capital plan, when we also first started the draft of the budget and the 5-year projections, and then it's also pulling in some of the information from the principles presented at the budget workshop. So really this captures all of those different strands of information and views and items that we've been discussing over the last few months. So if you've been paying attention, some of this will be a repeat of information you've already heard, but if you have any questions, please interrupt me at any time. If there's anything else I can help with, let me know.
And I will actually mention that after Michael's finished with the presentation, the committee can ask questions during, and we'll have a spot for public comment after as well. But I'm happy to take comments once he's at a conclusive spot in between from the public too, just because this is a public forum and I want to welcome those comments.
All right. So in big, from a high level, I'm going to talk about the district context for our budget requests, then a bit more information on the budget itself before I talk about the assessments. That's how the budget will be funded. So I'm talking about the needs of the district and then the funding. So the really high level takeaway is that we continue to see an increase in the needs of our students, both related to COVID and existing trends that were exacerbated by COVID. We need extensive academic intervention and broader social and emotional learning supports. We're also seeing an increase in special education. So that's about our needs. As you know, the school district, like families, like our communities, are subject to a lot of financial pressures right now related to the increase in inflation, to labour shortages and supply chain issues, and those are all driving up our costs. This is leading to a budget request of $1.5 million, around 3.6%, and that's breaking down to a little over $1 million the assessment for Harwich and $140,000 for Chatham. So that's the high level. And now I'll go into a bit more detail. So I want to talk a little bit about the context for these requests. So the vision for Monomoy Regional School District is for the district to be an exemplary school district that's preparing students as they enter the labour workforce that they will enter. So we want them prepared for the life they're going to lead. And all those things are changing. The world outside the district and the workforce that our students will be entering into is changing. As we try and do that, there are significant challenges facing us right now. As I mentioned, the disruption in students' learning experiences caused by COVID, that rapidly changing employment market, the developments we're seeing in technology that are really changing students' expectations of before they come into the classroom. It's also changing what is it the workforce is going to look like, and all those things that are, when we had remote learning during COVID, that's really changed people's understanding of what can happen in a classroom. Also things that we're seeing with chat, the chat GPT, and the challenges that includes. So that's really impacting our schools and the experience of our students. We're also seeing, and these things are all related and intertwined, We're seeing an increase in the social, emotional and mental health needs of our students. And along with that, we're having limited access to support for students for those needs outside of the district. This is particularly on the Cape. There's a real shortage of mental health and social emotional supports for students from BCBAs, behavioural health experts, psychologists and psychiatrists. There's a lack of those supports on the Cape for students. Then also one of the challenges the district is facing, and I know Mr. Smith, our curriculum leader, has been talked a lot, is about the need for equity for students. We know our students are having an inequitable experience in the school, and a lot of that is caused by a lot of the social pressures, but we're also asking ourselves what more the district needs to do to ensure that every student has an equal experience. We're also seeing high staff turnover, again, partly related to COVID and then the challenge of filling those positions, and then, as I mentioned, the financial challenges related to inflation and rising costs. And then just a little more about the context. So at the same time, our enrolment, we had a bit of a fall at the start of COVID, but since then, our enrolment's been pretty level. I know it's like the dog that hasn't barked yet. We keep waiting for the enrolment to fall faster, but at the moment it's staying relatively level. At the same time, within that overall enrolment, we're seeing a lot of changes within the schools. So the high school enrolment is going up. So one of the challenges we're facing right now is an increasing enrolment at the high school, where the principal is struggling to make sure the schedule works with the number of students they have. Meanwhile, the middle school has started to dip a little bit, and the elementary schools are still fairly level. Now, we know when we talked about 5-year projection, we're waiting for that enrolment to start to come down. But first, we've got to get over this little bubble, particularly at the high school, where we're seeing an increase. So we're not in a position, where we're seeing the number of students going down that would reflect a reduction in the budget. In fact, enrollment's staying kind of the same. In fact, in some places we're seeing an increase, but we're also seeing an increase in the needs of those students that we do have. And this is something we've talked about. We're also trying to educate those students this is a beautiful building, but it is also now 10 years old, so we're seeing an increase in some of the costs relating to this building, and we know the other buildings are much older than this building, and they have increasing costs related to the maintenance and replacement of some of the key building components. So our response, and this goes well beyond just the budget, but our response to all those pressures and challenges facing the district is to provide excellent classroom instruction with high quality instructional materials. So that, combined with additional support for social and emotional learning and mental health within our students, within our district, and also an ongoing commitment to equity, which is the thread that runs through all our work. And what does that mean in practice? When the rubber hits the road, what does this mean in practice, and how is this starting to impact the budget? And as you'll see, this means an investment in textbooks and curriculum, an investment in professional development. We had a budget transfer at our last meeting because we're spending more money on professional development as we meet these challenges. With the portrait of the graduate work, which is also another project which has been funded in this year's budget, which is looking at how we prepare students for the workforce they're going into. We're seeing a big increase in after-school enrichment programs, and a lot of that's been funded by ESSER for now, and that was something that the principals talked about when they spoke at their workshops. They expanded their after-school programs, which really improves students' relationships with the schools and keeps them engaged, and can be really critical in improving equity in our schools as well. But they all come with they all have costs. We're seeing an expansion in our preschool program. We're increasing our mental health and social emotional support staffing, investing in our buildings, and spending more on repairs and capital. So this is really I'm just kind of priming, I'm just setting up for the discussion of the budget. This is what's happening in the buildings right now, and this is what's driving our decisions on the budget. So, and we are seeing signs of progress. I mean, I've cherry-picked the best, some of the positive signs we're seeing that the principals presented. But I don't want, because I didn't want it to be all doom and gloom. Yes, there are challenges. Yes, there are difficulties. But our principals and our staff, working with our students, are really pushing forward, and we're seeing some improvements. The scores, you know, some of our scores and our experiences really dipped during COVID, but and that is true across the state. But we're starting to see some improvements, and there's a couple of examples from Harwich in the middle school. And as we continue to invest in the projects and, you know, the items I'm going to talk about in a moment, that will help to continue this progress. All right, so that was a lot about the context, but I really wanted to frame this conversation as we build the budget and assessments. You know, that we start kind of down here in this little kind of peach box on the bottom left, where it's our legal requirements and our strategic plan, which really captures that district context, our class sizes, the need for instructional support and operations. And those items really drive our expenditure, which then is broken down really in our salaries, our employee benefits, the state assessments, that's the money we get from the state, property and debt, our out-of-district tuition, and those district priorities. So those items are all feeding into our decisions about the expenditure. And then on the revenue side, and we'll talk about that as we get to towards the second half of the presentation, there's two different types of revenue. There's the revenue that comes off before the budget's finalised, and that's school choice, or circuit breaker, and grant, and our charter tuition. Sorry, not charter tuition, but our school choice, our circuit breaker, and some grants. They are all reflected in the final budget number. And then once that's settled, there's additional revenue which comes off the assessments. So there's kind of two different types of, just about how we treat that revenue. And then there's the assessments. And we're going to talk about all that in a little bit more detail. So the proposed FY24 budget is $44,323,116, an increase of some 1.5 million, or just shy of 3.6%. So that is, you know, that is a bigger increase than we've seen in the last few years, but as you know, it's still well below inflation. And it does reflect some of the increasing needs that we see in the district. So this is, you know, I have this slide. I won't go into this in too much detail because this is the same information you've seen before, but I just tried to reflect, you know, in this chart, the different, sort of, I pulled out some of the key items impacting the budget. So a blue line means that that item has increased the budget, and a red line means that it's decreased the budget. So school choice tuition, that reduction, that's a number of, and I've talked about this a lot because it's really you know, coming to our rescue a little bit on this budget this year, because the number of students who live in Chatham and Harwich who are choosing to attend other school districts, public school districts, that number is going down. And so where in the past we've had to pay a lot to those other school districts through the state, that cost is not with us. This is going down, and that's helping to offset other cost increases. You know, it's been going down for a couple of years, but we've kind of not banked those savings until now because we've been waiting to make sure that it doesn't come back somewhere else. You know, those numbers didn't go up in earlier grades or in other grades. And part of that is because before, I think the history of this is before Monomoy was formed and before the new high school was here, a lot of students had already chosen to go out through school choice. And they didn't come back. Some of them came back, but not all of them. So you had this kind of larger number go working its way up through the grades, which have now graduated, and so they come off the books. And that's part of the reason why the school choice number is going down. And because we're also not seeing in subsequent grades, once Monomoy was formed, once the high school came online, fewer students chose to go out. So those ones that are now graduating are not being replaced by other children choosing to go out during school choice. So we do have staff turnover. So normally I just sort of group start a staff turnover with the salary increases because it's all kind of they're all kind of related to staffing. But we did see a lot of staff turnover from the FY23 budget to the FY24 budget. So I wanted to just pull it out and highlight it here because that's some over $300,000 worth of savings just from staff leaving and being replaced by new staff who are lower down the salary scale. So that's where that saving comes from. So that's quite a significant amount of money. Of course, it's more than made up by the salary increases related to the contractual salary increases, which are already in contracts and settled. And that's basically just, when somebody gets the percentage cost of living increase plus any steps or lane changes, that's what that salary increase does. Salaries are by far the biggest percentage of our budget, so it makes sense that that would be the biggest increase as well. It's time, yeah, Maya. Let's think. So I have gone through all this before, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But the other big area is health insurance. Health insurance is a big part of our budget. So it's actually, the increase is not as big as it might otherwise have been. I was looking at the numbers today with Tish Crowell, our payroll manager, because we're actually seeing fewer people taking health insurance for a whole bunch of reasons. So actually in the last 3 years, the number of people taking health insurance, active employees taking health insurance, has gone down by 10 or 11 people, and that's because, for a bunch of reasons. I think it comes to turnover, we're hiring younger people who are sometimes still on their parents' health insurance, and they're replacing people who are well beyond their parents' health insurance who are retiring. So that's one of the reasons, and it might just be a blip, it's hard to tell, the other reasons for that, but because we are aware that we have a lot of people sitting in our staff right now who could take health insurance but have not opted for it yet. So we're just conscious of that possible cost. But for now, it's still health insurance increase. So this increase here is based on a 6% assumption. I had a meeting with the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group earlier this week. They will be voting on new rates next week. I don't think it's going to be as high as 6%. I think it could be closer to 4%, but that remains to be seen. We'll be having discussions. They presented a bunch of different scenarios. Quick aside, so the scenarios they're presenting do suggest that there is a more than 4% increase in health insurance costs. So the way they do their forecasts of our costs. So basically, at the end of the day, what our health insurance is trying to do is estimate what our costs on health insurance will be next year, when we pay for people's claims, and then make sure that what we are charging people in their health insurance premiums is at least as much as what the claims will be. And so it's always just a bit of you're guessing what's going to happen. I mean, there's lots of people who are paid lots of money to do very professional guesses, but they look at what we spent over the last 12 to 24 months and how many claims have been, and then they project that forward to see if the number of claims will go up and if the cost of the claims will go up. And they're expecting significant increases of up to 10% overall increases in costs. However, our Cape Cod Municipal Health Group has a healthy fund balance right now, and the board is planning to use some of that fund balance to offset the increases. And so that will keep the increases around 3 to 4%.
Yes, Ms. Henderson.
So is that just a one-time thing, or will that carry?
Well, so we had a long conversation about that. So part of every year, so we have a significant, the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group has built up a significant fund balance over the last, 10 years, and that is a combination of being slightly over, rates being slightly higher than claims, the money charged to employees being slightly more than the money spent out every year, but also from investment in the stock market with the fund balance. So that's actually, not in the last year, but historically that has brought in money for the fund.
Okay.
So there's this money sitting there. So the idea is to use that up to keep rates down for this year, but to use it up in a kind of sliding scale. So say we use, I'm just picking numbers here, but say we use $10 million from the fund this year, and then $5 million next year, and then 2.5 the year after, to give our kind of soft landing to increases in our claims, in our premium costs.
Yeah.
However, So that's part of the plan. The other plan is that what we have found over the last year is projections have been over actual costs. So we planned this year, we had a similar conversation last year. We said, our forecast is that it would, that it will be say it was an 8% increase, but we're actually going to keep it down at 3%, and we're going to use $10 million from the fund to offset those costs. That was the conversation last year. And then our costs are about exactly where we thought they would be. So we actually are not using up the fund balance. We're just, the premium costs are just about as much as our claims have been so far this year and projected out to the end of the year. So we keep trying to use up the fund balance, but then our costs keep coming in a little lower than we expected, and so we've not used up the fund balance. So we have this so there's two things going into it. One is, let's have a soft landing where we use some of our fund balance over the next few years and we come down to where we think it should be. At the same time, we're thinking maybe the cost won't be as much as this kind of outlined in this plan, and we won't actually have to dip into the fund balance as much as we think. So that soft landing can go out even further. So we'll keep saying, we'll keep using the fund balance to offset the costs.
Okay.
So I'm actually a little bit. So I'm actually, when I initially joined the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group Board, I was all for spending down the fund balance, and I was on that side of the argument. I was saying we've got to spend it. There's no point in having these funds. But increasingly, I'm a little anxious about where costs are going. If we continue to see inflation going up, if we continue to see the labour market, especially on the Cape, tightening, that's only going to increase the costs of paying hospital workers at Cape Cod Hospital. So I'm a little anxious of where health costs are going over the next couple of years. And there's a lot of uncertainty just coming out of COVID. We're still not really through all the uncertainty in the market and the economy and the labour market. So I want to be conservative about how we tap into that fund balance, and I think we're I think if we're using around 10 million, I think that will be reasonable, but it can't go on forever, and so we need to make sure that we're making responsible increases to our premiums, but without, at the end of the day, it's going to affect our employees and our ability to recruit people if our health insurance is more and more costly. So it's all really that balance. All right. Was there any other questions on this slide before I jump to the next one?
Ms. Games?
Thank you. Just a couple of questions since we're on this slide. Is there anything in this list other than maybe health insurance that we're still kind of waiting on numbers?
So that's a great question. Thank you. So one of those things is, the way the process is sort of structured is that we vote the budget in early January, that's our first draft, and then we have the opportunity to go and talk about that draft with you guys a lot, with our public hearing, we're going to present it to the select boards, and then we can take the feedback we get from those and we can update the budget, and then you have a final draft in March, which we approve. What I'd also like to do is where we know if we have a retirement in there that's going to affect salary costs, or we have other changes that we know about, I will also feed those in. So salary changes, there might be a change to salaries. Like if I know someone's come in that period, I'm like, it's crazy to carry a budget that's not realistic anymore. So we'll make some updates like that, just so that the information we have come March is as up to date as it can be. So there are any changes that we talk about, plus any new information we get, health insurance, staff turnover. Plus any new information we get, health insurance.
It's Sharon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
So those are a few. Yes, I will update that information. So I think salary increases, health insurance, utilities. So we have included an increase in utilities because everything that's happening with heating and electricity costs right now. So that was one area I wanted to keep under review because, when we first did this budget, we weren't even through December yet, never mind January. But I was just looking at how much we spent through to the end of January, and we're kind of still on kind of where I thought we would be. So I'm not thinking that's something else we would need to increase, because that was something I thought, well, we can come back because it'll be almost the end of February by then. And if we've seen that costs have gone up even more than we expected, then it might be an opportunity to adjust the budget there. But I'm reasonably confident on where we're coming out on utilities and heating. I think despite what's happening this week it's been a relatively mild winter, which here and in Europe, which has really helped keep costs down. And I think we're gonna, so utilities is one area, but I think we're okay. The other area, out of district may change, and that's something we've seen a lot of. There's a couple of a couple of tuitions out there that might change over the next few weeks, and I would update that if that information came available. But I realize I'm just listing everything on there now. But yeah, so I won't change anything unless new information comes around. But so it's partly, I just want to keep updating it so we've got the best information. But anything that changes, I will let you know.
Okay.
And Mr. Russell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just seeing that we've spent a few minutes on healthcare for our staff. Correct me, Michael, if I'm wrong. Over the years, we're unique to the extent in that major category, which is serious money, than the comparison with Chatham Municipal and Howard Municipal.
Yeah.
As I understand it, let's stay with my hometown, Howard, that when they conclude a budget within the municipal departments, healthcare for their staff does not show up in those areas. Instead, don't ask me how, but the Howard town covers that in a separate category.
Yeah.
So when we compare with the fire or the police, it's really not apples and oranges, because we include that in our 3 and 0.6.
Yeah, exactly right.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, at times you forget, but.
Yep.
Because then, and what happens is they say, oh, you've got this big increase, whereas their departments are not going up that much, but it's because they've captured health insurance increases in a different line. So it's worth, maybe that's something when we go and present, we can pull out the health insurance increase and say it would have been this much without health insurance, but it's, more with health insurance.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right. My clicker stopped.
Oh, no.
Oh, there we go.
Can manually do
Yeah.
it.
Well, okay, it's working again. Don't worry. All right. So staffing, you've seen this slide a couple of times now. Staffing has gone up a little in the last year, and that's partly funded through our ESSER. So we've also had to add additional instructional assistants for special education programs. And in addition, not reflected here, because this is all October 1st information, but we know we are adding some staff for an extended preschool program, for additional preschool section at the Harwich Elementary School. And those positions are also going to be funded by ESSER to begin with. This is something we're talking a lot about at the moment, is our class sizes. So the benchmark to which we hold ourselves is keeping the number of students in the middle and high school at 19 plus or minus 2 and 18 plus or minus 1 at the elementary level. So that's going to become, in some ways, that's going to be something we're going to keep coming back to, because as these classes get smaller, particularly the elementary school, but also the middle school in the long run, then that's something we're going to have to keep coming back to, is whether or not it's the right number for some classes. So when we get to, if you have 20 kids in a class in an elementary grade, is it really better for everybody if that's 2 classes of 10 versus 1 of 20? And that's something we'll keep them back to. But at the moment, we're still right around there for next year. So this is the budget needs. So this really captures all those items that the principals presented when they met with you. I'm sorry, it's a little difficult to read up there, but the very first one is the added pre-K session at Harwich. So I've put that in green because that is funded, because we're funding that from ESSER for now. So we just don't have the information right now how long the increase in preschool is going to last. So we know we have it through to the end of this year. We suspect next year, but then whether that continues for future years, we'll wait and see. And so while we wait, we're going to use ESSER in the hope that it will be a one-off and we'll go back to kind of normal numbers in future years. And if not, then this will have to be rolled into the budget in future years. We've talked, we had a long conversation both at the budget workshop and in previous meetings about the additional district-wide curriculum positions, the theatre house manager, and the other items in orange are all items that have been included in the budget. And I've got both the number and an assumption that we've made about their benefit costs. And then there's a whole bunch of items in red underneath those. So those are numbers. So some of those are relatively small items, like $2,000 for the culinary arts program and the kiln for the art program at Chatham, which I hope we'll be able to get into the budget for the next iteration. As we see the other changes with health insurance and staff turnover, I'm sure we can pick up those items that the principals highlighted. Some of the other bigger items will be more difficult, and I think that those are items we'll need to come back to over the next, really it depends on what happens with those other figures, whether or not we'll be able to pick up any more of these items before we finalise the budget in March. Any questions about those? We've heard a lot about them, so I won't go into detail on all of them. All right. Again, this is our capital items, which we talked a lot about, where our priority is updating. So really, they're all priorities. That's why they made it into the budget. But I'm really keen that we upgrade all our PA systems. That's a really important item. And also external lighting at the middle school. I think those are both critical for ensuring the safety of students, and we're hoping to get those done while the PA system's over the summer, and then the lighting a little later, because it doesn't really need to be in place until the fall. We're actually also in the process of applying for grants to support some of these costs as well. All right, so that's me kind of covered all of, might not feel like it, but we've covered $42 million worth of expenses right now, or $43 million. So now this slide is revenue which we use to offset those costs before we finalise the budget, just the way that the regional agreements written. Some revenue is taken into account before we finalise the budget. So school choice, that's a big one. That's $1.4 million. That's for students who don't live in Chatham and Harwich but choose to come into Monomoy schools. That number has gone down a little, but it's not as much as the number of students going out. So that's good. So that the net benefit of school choice for the district has gone up. So that's good news. Circuit breaker, we are using more of circuit breaker to offset the budget this year than last year. We basically have to use all of circuit breaker within a year of receiving it. So this is us using circuit breaker we received last year, which we know we received $524,000. So we just use that to offset the budget for this year. And that's all based on special education costs from the year before that. So there's like a 3-year cycle. We spend it, we receive it, and we receive the reimbursement, and then we use the reimbursement. And that's kind of an ongoing 3-year cycle. Grants are relatively stable from last year. We have not received any. We don't receive those numbers until the summer. We kind of use the historic numbers of grants. We are hoping that we might see an increase in Title I. That's based on low income levels in our area, and those went up. So we're hoping that we'll see an increase in grants. And then ESSER. So we'll have one more year of using those ESSER funds to offset salary costs and other projects, and then they won't. So that will not appear on the next year's slide. Will not have that ESSER bar, sadly.
Question?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs, thank you. If you don't mind clarifying on, if you want to roll it back just one slide on school choice.
Yes.
Has anything changed? So if somebody comes to us.
Yep.
It's just 5,000, correct? Has anything changed about that?
It's about $5,000, and in addition to that, there's some additional costs for special education.
Yeah. So since 1993, and the reason I ask, because it's important for us to always remember that if somebody comes to us, we're getting the $5,000, but that student has needs that we've got to still take care of, because whatever the number is now that it takes to educate a child, $5,000 doesn't cut it. So we're kind of at a loss, right?
Well, I, no, so.
I mean, I know we work our best to
So,
work
yeah,
them in
so-
to certain scenarios,
Yeah,
but yeah.
exactly. So,
I think my predecessor, when I was talking with her about school choice, I think had a very memorable quote. She said, if you have spaces in a classroom, and you think of it as a free seat
Yeah.
model, but the class size is below 18. There are seats there. You have an option. You can leave the seat empty, or you can get $5,000 worth of revenue. So there's not, you're not having $5,000 of added costs if you're, approaching school choice that way, where you're filling free seats, as opposed to you're having a third of your school district come in as school choice, and you're adding
Right.
classrooms, because, ever since I've been here, I've kind of taken the approach that we don't want to be in a situation where we're having to add an elementary classroom to accommodate all the school choice students. And in any given year, we have enough applications that we could do that. But those $5,000 aren't going to cover the teacher's salary and benefits and the teaching assistant. So we've taken, in this district, a very deliberate approach to look at school choice as a positive thing, using a free seat mentality on how we use it.
Yep, thank you.
yeah, I would, so, because, so some districts choose not to accept school choice, but then it's one-sided, so you can choose not to accept them, but you can't choose to stop students leaving through school choice. So, I would not thank you if you decided to stop doing school choice. If we were to just lose $1.4 million from our budget, even though the number of students would go down, I think, to the superintendent's point, the way they've been, given place in the district has helped to minimise the cost while maximising the benefit to all the students, including those.
This might not be the time, but I know it changes
Yeah.
each year, the per pupil rate, do you know?
So this year, so I can tell you the average, so it's an average because it does take into account special education needs. So the average is for FY '23, for FY '22, because it gets updated throughout the year as well, so we don't actually know what FY '23 will be yet. But for FY '22, the average was about $5,800.
For school choice,
For school choice.
but what about our per pupil
Our
rate?
per pupil? Oh, yeah.
It's
So
okay if you don't,
Well, we can just work it out. Let's see.
it's okay.
I'll tell you what, carry on and I'll work it out while talking. Somehow.
carry on without
Yeah, no, I'll
We
be
can't carry
I'll be
on
back in a
without
minute.
Yeah, we're gonna work that out.
All right.
All right. We'll get back to that.
All right,
Yes,
yes.
no worries.
All right. So the blue is the revenue before we set the budget. Then once the budget's set, we take into account this other revenue to reduce the assessments directly. So $4.3 million from Chapter 70. So that's my estimate based on the student numbers we have now. There's a whole lot of figures the state may put into that number, including the foundation enrollments and the financial data about each town, so that we will find out the exact number in March. 800,000, that's our excess and deficiency, so that essentially that's the money that was left over at the end of FY '22, which is certified by the state and can be used for offsetting this upcoming budget. Then there's the transportation aid, which has already been approved by a school committee way back in July, and that's a little up as well. $120,000 worth of charter aid, so that's down a little. So that's the number which so it's just the state has a formula. So we're actually charged for students who leave, Harwich and Chatham students who attend a charter school. The state assesses as a cost to help fund those charter schools. But then I assume through political wrangling when that was first set up, the state also agreed at the same time to fund districts to offset the impact of that cost. So we get some money back, and it's a sliding scale. We get some in the first year, the second year, and the third year, and we don't get anything after that. So we have seen the number of students leaving to go to charter schools went down this year. So that's why I assume that number will go down next year. Medicaid, I have seen Medicaid go up a little through the work of our staff and the new company we're using to help organise that. That's information we provide to the state on medical services we've provided to students in the district, and we get some reimbursement back on that. And that's gone up, I believe that's gone up because we've improved our reporting, and the state also allowed some COVID-related costs to be included. So it went up, it's gone up this year, and some of that's reflected for next year. And then the last one on the far right is our other district revenue, and that is up as well because that includes interest. And as you know, in the discussions with our treasurer, we invested some of our funds in treasury bonds, and we know we'll be receiving some $200,000 in interest on those funds in the spring and summer when those mature. All right, any questions about green or blue? Thank you very much. So the increase for...
Michael, can you just repeat Mr. Kelleher's question?
Yeah,
Because he's not mic'd.
Of course, yes. So the question was about why the salary increases were so much. So first of all, remember, salaries are like 80% of our budget. So it's always going to be a big number. And the increase for next year was 2.75%, so shy of 3%. So so it's always going to be a big number. It's always going to be the longest line, just because it's the biggest number. It's like 80% of our budget. And it is offset, remember, by a red line, which is the staff turnover. So it's kind of reducing our costs. Any other questions? All right. So we've done, the first step was to calculate the budget. The second step was so the first step, the 44.3 million, that was net of that, a first lot of revenue. Then we calculated the general fund revenue, state aid, which is 6.3 million, was an increase from last year. And then that leaves us with $38 million to be split between the two towns. So that's the process we've come so far. So those funds are split between the two towns based largely on the minimum contribution which the state assesses to each town, and we will find that out in March, and enrollment trends. And it uses this year's enrollment feeds into the state calculations, and the prior 3 years of enrollment feeds into the district calculations. And what that means, so this slide, and these numbers will change once we have the state's numbers, because the state tells us the final enrollment figures. But the district calculation is based on a 3-year average. And I wonder if oh, here we go, perfect. So here's the 3-year average. So this is the budget year. So the 2024 budget year is drawing on 20, 21, and 22. So you can see this minus 1.06. So that's actually a swing towards Chatham. But despite that, the one number above it is that 1.6, and that's still figuring in, that's the swing to Harwich, and that's still figuring into our 3-year averages. And that's why we keep seeing that little inch a little bit more towards Harwich. So, and even 2025, it's still actually a swing from Chatham to Harwich of 0.3%. So, unfortunately, because we have those, in the end of the day, that's enrollment. So there's fewer foundation enrollment students at Chatham versus Harwich, and that's why that number keeps swinging. So the idea behind the 3-year average is to kind of smooth out any big increases. But it also means you feel the impact of those increases for 3 years instead of it being all captured at once. And so this is our draft assessment based on that information. So I will say, and I know I keep saying this, but these numbers are all subject to change. Once we get the state figures, we will know the local minimum contribution. So I have estimated that based on the information we have right now about foundation enrollment and the numbers the state has provided to us on funding, but they haven't given us the final numbers. And they haven't given us the local financial information, which is critical in calculating those figures. But I have predicted an increase of some $800,000 for Harwich, a little more than $130,000 for Chatham. So those are assessed, and then we assess the operating budget. So that's our budget except transportation, capital, and debt is operating. So the operating budget above minimum contribution is assessed based on the new assessment methodology. So that's assessing each town the cost of their elementary school and then splitting up the rest of the costs based on foundation enrollment at middle school and high school. And all that breaks out at 11.8 million for Harwich and 4.5, almost 6 for Chatham. Relatively small increase for Chatham and just over 100,000 for a Harwich. Transportation, the actually percentage in enrollment for transportation hasn't changed much from last year to this year. So the increase in costs is just split between the two towns as it was in the same percentage in the previous years. Transportation is going up because we're finding it harder to recruit staff. So that's put up salaries. Obviously, the cost of fuel and so on has also gone up. All right. And capital. So, I was just talking to one of our members of the public before this meeting about capital. So as you can see, the capital for Chatham's actually went down this year, and that comes back to the new change, the change to the assessment methodology. So for this year, Chatham had all the capital costs related to Chatham Elementary School, and that included, when we did this budget, the cost of the feasibility study for a new roof. But we didn't get into the program, and they're not even running the program next year. That's the Massachusetts School Building Authority. So there's that number is not in the budget for next year. So that's a real reduction for the costs that would have fallen to Chatham. And instead, the $200,000 we're invested in capital is district costs, which get split on the same percentages between Chatham and Harwich. So that's why Chatham's going down, because we're taking out something that they were paying for 100% and replacing it with something they're paying for 25, 26%. Does that make sense? And then debt is just the debt on the high school, and that goes down every year just with the schedule of payments. So it does feel like a big increase for Harwich, but it's still less than it would have been under the old assessment method.
Yeah, Ms. Henderson.
So I know with the change in leadership at the state level, you're still not sure, do you have a?
March 1st,
Oh,
I think.
okay.
Yeah,
Oh, that's good.
but yeah,
Because
hopefully.
you weren't quite sure.
But I don't know for sure. Somebody just said they think it's March 1st. Like, I don't know, like,
Yeah.
I don't want to, I can't reveal my sources, but they're not
Not good?
they're not very reliable. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll hope for
So I
March
guess
1st.
I'm really not really any more clear than I was back then.
Okay.
I guess, but we're hoping around March 1st. I'm almost finished. These are just items. This is to your point, Tina, about what is still to come, right? So state funding, health insurance figure. I'll update some of those staffing figures, and then obviously budget. If we can get in some more of those budget needs, we'll put them in. And I'm working on finalising the busing contract because we have been talking to Cape Cod Collaborative about what the final salaries and hours will be for the bus drivers. So that's something that they're soon to finalise. And then we'll vote March 9th, and hopefully I'll have all the answers by then. I did have
I do have a
sorry,
question.
Go ahead.
So
Ms. Gates.
hypothetically, let's just imagine for whatever reason, we
Yeah.
don't get all the state numbers. How does that affect the March 9th vote?
So if we don't have the numbers, then we'll delay the vote.
Okay,
And we can do that. I mean,
Okay.
the town will be frustrated because they'll have to wait a little longer to get the number, but they'll want the right number as well.
Yep.
Yeah,
I mean, in theory, we can vote numbers right up to obviously the select boards want the numbers for their town meeting articles and everything, but, that, to be honest, we are at the mercy of the state a little bit.
Yep.
And we have the number, we'll have the number.
okay.
And then I just concluded our 5-year outlook about what's coming. you know, because trying to look beyond FY24, what else is out there? The big thing is ESSER and then and then the employment contracts can come. All right, that's it.
Thank you,
7
Michael.
minutes to spare.
I know the committee did ask some questions, and we had one from the public, but I'd love to hear if anyone has any other questions or need clarification from Michael while he's here regarding the presentation or something that maybe wasn't presented. We would be happy to hear from you. Charles? Yeah, absolutely. If you want to come to the podium, Charles, please feel free. Don't go far, Michael. Coming for you.
No, Charles Gruska, 6 T-Berry Ave, Harwich. I don't have questions. I have comments and reactions to the budget. Based in my role as a citizen taxpayer of Harwich, with a 34-year background as an educator, 24 as an administrator, but primarily as a citizen taxpayer. First of all, I want to congratulate the administration and the school committee on the tremendous transparency that they brought to this budget process, which is far superior to anything I've ever witnessed. Any member of the public who's wanted as much information as possible about the budget has certainly received it through the administration and in their presentations to the school committee. Particularly, congratulate you on the budget workshop that you gave an extra meeting, extra time to, that any member of the public could have attended, where the the principals and the directors had an opportunity to speak directly, face-to-face to you and justify or rationale their concerns to you. I never had that opportunity in 24 years as a principal. That always was delivered secondhand, and I'll leave it at that. You've had the opportunity to hear firsthand information directly from the source in making your judgments. I want to, first of all, point out that one of the big drivers, and I'm a Harwich resident, of the budget, which drives Harwich assessment up, especially for what we heard about health insurance, probably the second, that looks like it's going to get better, and that means the second biggest driver is going to probably be the new curriculum director positions for grades 5 through 12. I want to just comment that my experience is that's where the rubber hits the road in the classroom. And curriculum and instruction, is the heart of achieving the goals of the district. And a large portion of the responsibility for curriculum and instruction in buildings falls on the building administrators. At your last meeting, Mr. Smith gave a tremendous exposition of the role of building principals, the extensive role of building principals and all their responsibilities. I always felt that I was shortchanging curriculum and instruction because of all the other demands of my role that were very high priority, including keeping a lid on the building and make sure we, first of all, have a safe and healthy environment for students to attend. These two positions are going to be a major, major boon for curriculum instruction from my perspective, my opinion, and they're going to be a huge help to the building administrators. This week, the high school, I'm on the high school school council as a community member, and our entire meeting was devoted to the 3 building administrators presenting concerns of the time they're having to devote to discipline issues and social emotional issues of students. It's becoming all time consuming, and you can tell the strain on them to concentrate on curriculum instruction, which is where the rubber hits the road. So this is a huge budget driver, and just as one member of the committee, one citizen taxpayer, I just heartily, strongly support this position in the budget. And if there's pushback to it, I'm happy to support it in any forum. It's also going to make the work of Mr. Smith a lot better because he's going to be able to concentrate on the elementary level, which takes me into some other areas. This is a very good budget in that it keeps class sizes at an educationally sound level and a level that's enviable to many school districts. And that's wonderful. There are To me, it's an insufficient budget because, right now, because of certain needs that have been brought forward to you that aren't being met. And I think some of them are particularly important, and I wanted to comment to that. And I'm hoping that the good news that that you heard tonight on health insurance may be able to, bring the money forward to get these things in the budget that are on the not yet funded list. I want to talk about Chatham Elementary School administrative assistant position being expanded. Principal is the highest paid and most important person in the school building. For the principal to be doing clerical tasks is not a good use of my taxpayer money. And I fought every year as a principal for more clerical assistance in the office. And sometimes at the elementary level, it's the thighs, well, that's a small school with, the fewest number of students in the district. But what I always like to point out to people is that every administrative task that takes place in the biggest building, the largest building in the district, in this case the high school, has to take place in every school building. One exception is at the high school, we have guidance clerical functions, but usually have a guidance clerical staff to focus on that. So I strongly support the importance of expanding that administrative position as was requested by the building principal, so that principal can do administrative work and all those roles that you heard about at the last meeting. The intervention specialist request, I was shocked by the data that was shared about students reading below grade level. You had this discussion last year at this time. There were some requests for expanding assistance in that area, but you had a new language arts curriculum coming in that's been a tremendous boon from my perspective. And the data was showing, bringing about tremendous gains. But there's a large percentage of students that are not reading at grade level in the elementary grades. And nothing has changed from last year that I know of saying that being behind grade level and reading at third grade is the best predictor we have of future failure and school failure and life failure down the road. So it's a major red flag from my perspective, just looking at it from the outside. And it's a red flag telling me that 10 years down the road, it's going to be hard for the district to achieve the goals it's put forward because of what's happening on that level. And so I asked the committee to take a good, hard, and serious look at that, and just from my perspective, in terms of its importance among the priorities of the district. A couple of small items at Chatham Elementary, the kiln for $5,000 approximately in the flex furniture, which has proven to be a boon, as was reported at the budget workshop. That seems like very small dollars in relation to a huge budget. And so I advocate for that, with the observation that, for my figures, as I look at the assessments for for FY24 as they stand now, the Harwich assessment is almost $8 million above the 2011 level, the last year prior to regionalization. The Chatham assessment is still below the 2011 assessment that Chatham had for its schools by almost $500,000. So I know I'm from Harwich. I know these items that I've just talked about all would fall under the Chatham Elementary School budget, so they basically affect the assessment of Chatham, and I don't think the assessment of Harwich. But I do think they're very important, and I maybe address my comments particularly towards the Chatham representatives on the committee. And one last observation, or one last point, there's an item for common area furniture for the high school. Again, as a member of the high school council, I've had an opportunity, and you have an opportunity to see firsthand. This is not the fault of the students. This is not from what was explained, this is wear and tear that was not expected at this level. And one concern I have is this building is terrific. This building looks like it just opened every time I walk into it. And that the credit to the maintenance staff but a credit to the students and everyone who works here and how the respect that they treat their building. Sometimes when you let one little thing start to go and people start to notice that's getting shabby, those kinds of things spread. I'd love to see that nipped in the bud. Maybe if it can't be done all in one fell swoop, maybe it can be done over 2-3 year progression, so much a year for replacement too. Keep the building a source of pride for all of us who pay the taxes to support it. I thank you very much for the opportunity to share my views and perspectives on the proposed budget with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles, very much. I think we have Laura.
Good evening, Madam Chairperson and school committee members. I am Laura Weatherup, the president of the Monomoy Education Association. On December 8th, 2022, Michael McMillan presented the preliminary budget to you. There was a slide presented that outlined 7 full-time positions that total $590,000 roughly, that are all funded by ESSER funds that are going to run out in September 24, as he reminded us tonight. These 7 positions include a district-level mental health coordinator, an adjustment counselor, 3 math interventionists, a nurse, and a school counselor, and then tonight he also said the new preschool section was also funded by ESSER funds. On that slide, he said, quote, "When ESSER funding runs out, these positions will have to be cut unless they can be funded from another source," end quote. It is important to remember that just because the funding runs out does not mean that these needs disappear. As Michael reiterated tonight, the effects of the pandemic are still being felt and will be for several years to come. So, following that, on January 19th, and again tonight there was a slide similar, there was a summary of budget priority needs that was presented. Based on that list, there are still several unfunded teaching positions that listed that the elementary school principals have both requested. These positions include replacing a math instructional assistant with a teacher level at Harwich Elementary, bringing back a special education teacher that was cut 2 years ago when numbers were lower in kindergarten and first grade at Harwich Elementary, and adding, as Charles said, the math and reading interventionist at Chatham Elementary. Not only do the students at Chatham need the intervention, not providing the interventionists is actually inequitable, and we keep talking about equity between the two towns. So I'm here to express the union's concern about the district spending $257,000 on 2 new administrators when we have positions that have not been funded that would directly benefit students. Your priority should continue to be on improving student achievement. The funding of teaching and mental health positions that are directly helping students is the best way to accomplish that. Once those positions are filled and students have recovered from the effects of the pandemic, then we can focus more on data analysis and having additional staff to evaluate teachers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura. Yep, Mr. Kelleher? Kelleher.
Mark Kelleher, Harwich, also on the Finance Committee. Several years ago, you had some major damage from rooftop units. I just hope you're taking into account the extreme weather we're going to have this weekend. That would not be a good thing to have that type of damage again. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Carpenter?
Yeah, Mark, good point. In fact, I think as I'm sitting here, the superintendent, text chain has been going, what sort of preparations are everyone making? So we've, Michael and I and our facilities director have been, discussing it. So we've, we'll be, we've had the company that helps with our rooftop units here, in just, how we'll close down the dampers, and I think just as people are going to have to do in their household, you need to go and sort of turn up the heat to make sure that that you don't have freeze-ups during this. So we'll have to do that in all of the buildings, including this, to make sure that we don't have those freeze-ups. But anytime we have one of these cold snaps, that's that's the first thing. It's sort of like, okay, what's the plan? We also think things that have changed over the years. All of our buildings have computer systems that are monitoring. So our leads are going to be monitoring the buildings throughout the cold snap, and can go shut things down, and we'll have people coming in to go and just monitor that has anything burst anywhere. But it's definitely going to be chilly tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We have increased their expenditure on HVAC significantly in the last year or so. So,
feel like
and
it's
we
on
have a new
everything
vendor.
we look at.
Yeah,
HVAC.
and we do preventative maintenance visits several times a year on all our HVAC equipment, so, and we've done a lot of repairs this year, so I really hope all that will pay off when the temperatures get down.
All right, great.
Thank you, so the superintendent managed to get the per pupil expenditures on the DESE website for 2021.
Oh, great.
So Monomoy's per pupil cost is $20,773. And then some comparisons. Dennis Yarmouth, DY, they're just a little lower. It's 20,728. Nauset is up at 23,259. So that's some, $2,500 more than we are per student. Then within Nauset, Brewster, which is the elementary school, is $25,000. Orleans is $31,000 per student. I mean, some of those costs will, because they're much smaller, the same costs are spread over a fewer number of students. Truro is up at $32,000, P-Town $41,000. So, so that puts, it shows two things. One, it's a lot more than we get for school choice, but partly through how we've used school choice funds and everything else, we're able to keep the per pupil cost down.
Thank you.
Great,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Is there any other questions from the public tonight? All right. And Ms. Stout? Sharon?
She doesn't have her hand.
Yes, is it appropriate for me to say something now?
Sharon, that's fine if you have a question. If you could just mute your television.
Sharon,
that's fine if you have a question. If you could just mute your television. I think it's my television.
I tried to mute it. I'm putting it way down.
I think that's perfect, Sharon.
Is that?
That's fine, go ahead.
Okay. So, I've been reading this, I've talked with Mike McMillan. I really think our budget is too low. I don't think we're taking into account some of these positions that needs to, teaching positions that need to happen.
Would you like Michael to respond, Sharon? Go ahead.
That would be fine, because I don't think this is the place we don't make motions at this. This is only a hearing.
This is just a budget hearing for the public, yes, but Michael can answer or maybe comment on your question or statement, Sharon, if you'd like.
It's a budget hearing for the public, yes, but Michael can answer or maybe comment on your question or statement, Sharon.
So, I mean, I guess all I would say is that we do try and balance the needs, and we have a fiscal responsibility to keep our request to the towns within a.
I think we need to mute Sharon.
So to keep our budget, our assessment request to the towns within a reasonable level, and the
Is there a way to do it?
and the district. I mean, and it's just, we as the district leadership team reviewed those priorities and identified those which we thought were the most important to get within a budget fixture, which we thought.
One second.
Sorry, it's just very distracting hearing my own voice.
But you sound great. You
Thank
get
you.
to see it back.
Yeah,
It's like you get to hear it back, and you're like, all right.
What is that idiot
great.
talking about? I guess the other thing is that we do hope that some of those items that are still moving around will come down and we'll be able to include some of the other costs. I mean, I think also to some of the comments were made earlier, we are very anxious about those SRA numbers. At the same time, we are looking at, looking a couple of years ahead and how enrollment might change, and if there's other, changes to staffing levels that will help to offset the costs of those ESSER funds. So there's just a lot of moving parts. I mean, on one hand, yes, we're very alive to the needs of the school in providing sufficient staffing levels to tackle all the issues, but we're also trying to make sure we have an operating budget, an ongoing budget, which we can live within and the towns can live with. So, yeah, I guess it's a balance.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Mr. Russell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. More of a comment than an answer to this. And it seems to be every year that we sit here at the closing of budget time, we're faced with what Sharon just alluded to, and Madam President, what you wished for and hoped for. So it's nothing new to us. It is frustrating. Madam President, you did make one comment that I fully agree with you. You said the task is to the improvement of student achievement. A couple of things strike me that is such a big challenge for us. You mentioned the extra, the 2 curriculum developers of that, and the reason we have a request for that. How would that help? No matter how Michael, and he did a terrific job today, cuts the mustard, it really, when you then go before this meeting in another month or two, where we really have to finalize these numbers at a select board meetings, we're really faced with at least one major area that draws all of our financial attention to, and that is class sizes. We have been fortunate, based on the planning of Dr. Carpenter going back 10 years when he first arrived, that figure is probably one of the best class size elementary and secondary numbers on Cape Cod. I don't know, it's plus or minus 19 or 18, and much like Charles, my whole was a career of a mirror of his. And I saw average class size with the contract wording of strive, and the strive was at 25. And this was a very large middle school. So when I saw class sizes of 15 and 14 and 19, those are magnificent ways, and you have to hold on to that. Now, if you can't because the town can't afford it, to me, that's the spoke of the wheel. The moment you move that key spoke to get the 19 to 21, what you're doing is subtracting classroom teachers in front of kids. And the 18 youngsters, and I know this is known to all of us, I'm just refreshing my own tired mind. That 18 or 17 youngsters turns out to be 20 or 21. No one on this board wants that to happen. However, the other thing in Mr. Smith's report a week or so ago that struck me, and it's been a dilemma here for years, Monomoy, Chatham, and Howard, let's stay with Howard, pays far more than the minimum required by state formulas. So that's a good thing to pat ourselves on the back. There was a graph that Mr. Smith had that then took those towns and matched up with their MCAS scores. Now, most towns that in their mission statement hope to be superlative, stellar students. You wouldn't match your growth and applaud yourself to have matched MCAS scores. But for some reason, and we really don't know what it is, for 10 years, we match or even in some categories dip below the state average. And yet we're at the higher level of contribution towards kids. Improvement of student achievement. We've got to figure a way to help and coach the staff and parents' intentions to help their kids come along, whatever variety we can do beyond building this, in this case, this beautiful high school. That's the challenge. And the one thing we wouldn't want to have to do is to cut that, increase the class size to cut our budget in order to satisfy the needs of the select board or Chatham's needs or whoever it might be. Because the issue that what we're trying to do is to increase achievement. It'll just get worse. So I agree with the request of, I forget now, but the 5 or 6 teachers in lieu of something. to me, I don't see that is the way, the route to go. So we'll consciously a couple more months before we have a final figure, but that's really, I think, where we're really trying to protect that class size here in the district K through the high school.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. All right, I think oh, yes, absolutely, come on up. Ms. Kavanaugh?
Good evening, Madam Chair, and thank you for this wonderful presentation, Michael. It's really thorough. And I just want to point out that I agree that the major structure that we're trying to achieve here is to help our students and increase their educational needs. I think one important thing that teachers are facing, and we talked about it at the Howard Huddle the other day, is the interruption in housing and the impact that that's having on children and families, and the extra additional tasks that puts to the teachers when they have children coming in and going out. And so that, coupled with COVID, I feel that, once again, the Cape, which we're lucky to live in this unique peninsula, but we're faced with additional challenges. And in addition to those challenges, the other costs of increased, that we're all feeling at the supermarket and everywhere else in terms of goods and services, we feel it even worse. So, I think we have to try to empower ourselves too at every level to get as much money as we can from grants and the state and any other way. I mean, I know that when we were at the Mass Municipal Conference a week and a half ago, they understood the need. The Lieutenant Governor specifically said she understood the need for you to have those numbers in March early, so we're hoping the same way. But I just want to say thank you for the presentation. It's always difficult when we're talking about budgets. I despise it, actually. And so I just want to say that there's so many other pieces in COVID, as I've been saying for the last year and a half. I knew this day was coming. I knew that things were going to cost more, but, it's imperative that our kids' mental health and their education is taken care of. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. For the record,
Ms.
Julie
Gaines, yeah?
Kavanaugh, Harwich Select Board.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, that's.
She might want to have just been known as Julie Kavanaugh tonight. Member
Sorry,
of the
I
general
blew the
public. Now you just called her right out. All right, I think we are good. Sharon wasn't here in the beginning, but she's here now, so we'll have to roll call vote out. So I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And we'll roll call out. Ms. Stout? I'll come back.
And we'll roll call out, Ms. Stout?
Aye.
Ms. Games?
Aye.
Ms. Gray? Ms. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Henderson?
Aye.
And the chair is an aye. We will, adjourning at 7:20. I'm just going to take about 4 or 5 minutes. If you just get up and stretch before we open up the next meeting. Leah just needs to do some technical things that we couldn't do during this meeting. Welcome to the Monomoy Regional School District's School Committee meeting, Thursday, February 2nd, 2023 at 7 p.m., held in the high school library. The meeting will be broadcast to Channel 22 as well as live streamed and recorded on Monomoy Regional School's YouTube channel. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 7:32 p.m. With a roll call in. Ms. Stout? Ms. Games? Aye. Ms. Gray?
Aye.
Ms. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Henderson?
Aye.
The chair is an aye. Ms. Stout? Okay, all right. We'll move forward with public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment? Seeing none. Reports and discussions. First item on the agenda is the special education budget presented by Ms. Melissa McGuire.
I wish I could do that.
Touche.
Good evening, Melissa McGuire, Director of Student Services. And I always find it really important to dive a little deeper into understanding special education and the costs. Oh, somewhere. Okay. All right. Uh-oh. I do, but I think you have to push one first to get it to go. I think you have to push one slide. Oh, like push one slide down. Move it once. No, there, yeah. Yeah, that works. Okay. So I've been using this statement, I kind of made it up, about 15 years ago. So I've never veered from it because I believe it's true that our special education costs are quite visible, but our student disabilities are often invisible. You can't see the word because it's actually invisible. So I think that's important. So we're going to focus on enrollment, special education enrollment, circuit breaker, out of district, some mitigating costs, transportation, extended year services, contracted services, operational costs, grants, and future considerations. So there's quite a bit that goes along with our special education budget. First of all, just reminding folks that the responsibility of a school district is to provide every student with a free, appropriate public education in the, excuse me, in the least restrictive environment, ages 3 to 22. So with that in mind, we have to think about all of the supports and services that our students need. So I just have a 4-year enrollment enrollment numbers from 2019 to current. So currently, based on the October 1 numbers, we had 315 students receiving special education services on October 1st. So as always, and even when I was looking at the 10-year numbers, we've always been below the state percentage of students receiving special education services. So that's remained consistent. But as of January, we had 319 students. So what that meant is 4 additional students were eligible for special education services. However, with that, there's also additional students. Right now, we have currently 26 students who are in the evaluation process to determine eligibility for special education. We have the highest referrals, believe it or not, after vacations, after students have been out for some time without instruction or supports. So we get a significant amount of referrals over the winter breaks. And then of those 26, not all will be found eligible. And additionally, through our evaluation process, we'll have some students that will terminate from special education. I celebrated 2 this week that I participated in, and I call it a celebration. I called it a celebration when my son terminated from special education. So we do have that those numbers as well. So it's a fluctuating number always. And then the other part of it is our children turning 3 for preschool, that they turn 3 all year long. They don't just turn 3 on October 1st. So that number fluctuates as I presented the last time. The other piece of our enrollment is students who have moved in, and we have quite a few students who not only move in, but also move out as well. And then our school choice, we currently have 55 of our total enrollment in special education, our school choice students. So just wanted to, again, highlight kind of the fluctuation in our special education enrollment. Again, the referrals, and then students who, that wasn't supposed to be 2017, that was supposed to be 2022. We've had 33 evaluations, and again, 7 students who exited. So, you know how I love videos and just love to show Munchkins? Well, every time I seem to show a video, it doesn't go well, so I decided just to do collages. So, I'm going to start at the elementary. These are our ISLE program Munchkins, and those students are grades 1 through 4. When we introduced the additional ISLE preschool program, that is pre-K through K. Because what was happening is the enrollment in our ISLE elementary program was getting just too high. So we now have the ISLE pre-K, and then this is ISLE K through 4. And then for our surf program, which is also at Howard Elementary, here's our Munchkins having some fun out in the playground and in the classroom. And in the report, I'm not going to detail every description of the programs. I gave a detailed description of each of our programs in the report. And then here's our Shells program at the middle school. They probably are the most excited group when it comes to the Special Olympics. And during COVID, which was really nice, the associate commissioner of DESE actually showed the film of the middle school that they did virtually at one of our state directors meetings, so it was really, really cute. And this is our SAIL program. This is up at the high school, and they are engaging in a lot of pre-vocational and vocational tasks throughout the high school and a lot of community experiences. And then finally, our SHORE program, which is our 18 to 22-year-old program. And they are all working in the community in some capacity. So they're very rarely in the building. So that hopefully had to put a smile on your face. So when I talk about numbers, you can keep your smile on your face. So Michael talked a little bit about circuit breaker, and it's the reimbursement that we get for dollars we spend over a certain foundation. So they base it on the number of students that we can claim that meets that foundation. And then there's a percentage, it's 75% reimbursement over that foundation amount. So over the past 5 years, we have received a 75% reimbursement rate. But I can tell you, though, a little over a decade ago, maybe 12, 13, I don't remember the year, but it was down to like 40%. And in the legislation, it called for 75%, except with a small print that says state budget, approved. So we're very fortunate that we have received our 75%. So one of the other costs and services that we provide students is an out-of-district placement, and those are for students who have a significant disability where we cannot provide the supports or services here in our schools. So right now, this year, we have 13 students in out-of-district programs, and as you can see in the various levels. Next year, this has been waffling. It was, and again, today, I could tell you it's probably 9 students. And so this is variable based on students' needs. Primarily, our students that are out of district are in a day program placement so that they receive transportation to and from their day program. But we also have students who are in residential programs who need 24-hour care. And we possibly have 2 kids that may graduate this year. So again, these numbers will fluctuate. So what do we consider with out of district and the costs? Certainly disabilities that are unique, and what we're seeing more so, and not just in Monomoy, but across the state, is this increase in the intensity of mental health and the need for clinical-based treatments and programs and residential, because parents aren't able to care for them as well. So those are unique disabilities that are considered. We also have what's called the move-in law. So we may have a student who was in another town and they've moved to our town. And so the way that cost works is if they move here before April 1st, okay, we then will pick up the cost the following year. If they move here after April 1st, the previous district who was paying the tuition not only has to pay the tuition for the remainder of the year, they also have to pay the tuition for the following year. Now that goes for us as well. So if one of our students moves out of district who's residential, that applies. So it's rare that happens. What happens more typically is a student in a day program will move here, and it's the collaborative tuition that does not have the same legislative ruling. So if you're in a collaborative program, whenever you move, the district that receives you picks up that tuition. So there's a lot that kind of goes into monitoring that and the financial piece of it. So what I want to talk about is, the mitigating costs, especially as we've added programs. We've built a really nice structure for a continuum of services from preschool right up through postgraduate programming. And so when we look at the different costs for out-of-district versus if we had an in-district program. Now, I want to preface that these are hypothetical numbers, meaning if I took the lowest out-of-district tuition, which is a collaborative tuition of $47,000, okay, and I multiplied it by the 15 students. Now, again, what I want to say is the 15 students, I'm just multiplying as if they were day students. I'm not talking about the residential. So the potential cost of those 15 students in elementary alone in our program, so our IEL program, our SURF program, all right, those 15 students, it would cost us $713,000, okay? Now, right now, we have 2 teachers and 12 assistants to support those 15 students, okay, in our current programs. So if you look at the difference, there's a $193,000 savings and difference versus us sending them out of district. So my point going across this whole, at our middle school program, the Shells program, at the high school program, the SAILS and the SHORE program, I didn't even include our SAND program in this, and then our postgraduate, which is 18 to 22. If you take all of those students, and if we did not have these programs, they would have to go somewhere because we wouldn't otherwise be able to support them. So with that, with the lowest tuition, right, and when I calculated the teachers and the assistants, I used the highest salary because I'm really trying to make a point here, right? Like I could have put the highest out-of-district tuition for these students, and it would have been even grander. But with the lowest tuition and the highest cost for us, we're still saving almost $1 million by creating valuable programs for our students in district.
Melissa, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
The high school and the post-grad programs?
Yes.
It has 1 teacher, 4 assistants, 1 teacher, 4 assistants. Is that the same teacher?
No, they're 2 different programs. It just happens to be the same number of staffing. Yes. All right. So that was my wow factor for tonight, is presenting that. One of the other pieces, Michael talked about this earlier too, but we provide not only out-of-district transportation, but we also provide in-district transportation. But the out-of-district transportation alone is, certainly significant because we have students going to all different programs, some that are over the bridge, not all are on the Cape. And so we also offset a little bit of those costs through our federal grant. Extended school year services, this is a service a student is eligible for if they meet the criteria, which is the prevention of substantial regression. Typically what happens is when students come back to school, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks to recoup all the skills that they learned in the previous year to build on. So for a student that has special needs, what we do is we look at almost doubling that. And if it takes longer than that, then they really need to have the continuity of their services over the summer. So we have students who are eligible from elementary to the high school levels, and so these are our costs for our summer programming. And then we have additional services that we provide. They're through contracted services, and that varies from year to year depending on the student's disability and the need for services. So, for example, we do have an orientation and mobility specialist. We have a teacher of the visually impaired, vision specialist. We have home-based services. We have a psychologist, BCBA, which is a board-certified behavior analyst, consultant, translators and interpreters, and then tutors that we need for when a student is either hospitalized or home because of a hospitalization. So those come under our medical and therapeutic services. And then some just basic operational costs, legal fees. So if there's any situation that requires our special education attorney, we do have that budgeted. I have to say, which I'm pleased with, is our costs for legal services are quite low for special education. And I, really want to commend our staff and our programs because we don't have a lot of legal issues. Testing supplies, that's for the psychologists and the teachers and the related service providers to be able to evaluate with the tools. Part of the issue and that we face with testing supplies is that when a test is no longer valid, you have to purchase a whole new test, and they're very, very costly. So we use a 2-year plan because you have 2 years to replace an evaluative tool. So we really try to plan that so that it's not hitting us all at once because they are quite costly. We also use, which has been amazing, we use an online service through Pearson called Q Global and Q Interactive, and that allows the evaluation to happen on iPads with the student and the evaluator, and it helps to really analyze those results and helps to provide a report, which takes less time for our evaluators. So that's been really helpful in keeping our costs down. The instructional materials, that is all of the supplies that we need to support the unique learning needs of our students. And as you can see, is a little bit higher in '22, and that was because of COVID and the amount of materials and supplies that we needed to provide our students. But we typically budget for each teacher a certain dollar amount so that they can evaluate the needs of the students and purchase those supplies. And then, of course, professional development. So these are the grants that we currently have. These are entitlement grants, so there are federal IDA grants. And with that, last year, we did get, American Rescue Plan grant under IDA 2. That's a 2-year grant, and that's what's helping to offset and supplement some of our staffing that Michael talked about. In addition, we also get through IDA an early childhood grant, and we did get the same entitlement grant through the American Rescue Plan as well. And that was 2 years, so that will go away. We have to spend that by the end of this year. So overall staffing, looking at the district, you have myself, the Director of Student Services. We have a physical therapist that's .6 that works in all 4 of our buildings. We have a mental health coordinator that works in all 4 buildings. She's been invaluable this year. And just really supporting some significant needs that we have that might not otherwise be addressed. Our board-certified behavior analyst is working 25 hours weekly, and that's contracted service. We have an out-of-district coordinator that works, it's not so much a day, it's .2, but she works hours based on the needs of our out-of-district students. So she schedules meetings when there needs to be meetings and makes the phone calls. So we work very closely together. And then we have 2 float nurses. One nurse is funded through ESSER. And then I broke down the staffing at each of the schools. At CES, we have a .5 team chair. The other .5 is the preschool team chair, so where you see the 1.5, so it's 1 person. Just waiting for that little connection thing to move so we can see the progress. Oh. I could sing while I wait. I could, I'm losing my voice, I think. Yeah. Okay. All right, so for team chairs, now team chairs are responsible for the oversight of the special education programs in the buildings. They facilitate the team meetings, they make sure that we follow the regulations and are in compliance with all the regulations and support the teachers with those programs. And for the teachers, I just, wanted to illustrate the number of teachers we have in each building for special education. Clinical means our psychologists and counselors. I put them all under one umbrella of clinical. Our instructional assistants, our occupational therapists. We have, actually, that's not right, because one of it, I apologize, one is a 0.8, so it's not 1.0 and 1.0. So I split 1.8 between 4 buildings, so I'll have to fix that. And of course, our nurses, how many nurses that we have, and our speech staff. At CES, we have a 0.5, and again, it's budgeted at 0.5, but she works 0.4 because it's too difficult to schedule, a half a day to service students, so she comes in 2 full days. Well. Oh, there we go. So just looking at considerations, we know that we have budgeted for the preschool classroom at Howard Elementary. We currently have a 0.5 teacher who has begun. Our little munchkin started already, so she started last week, and we will move that to a 1.0 in the fall. At Chatham Elementary, we also spoke about the SEAL program and the needs of students that we have at not only Chatham Elementary, but also in our ISLE program, which is kind of busting at the seams, that we have students that would be more appropriate for that kind of program. The program at Howard Elementary was initially set up to support students on the autism spectrum, and what's happening, because we have other students with significant needs, there hasn't been another program. So we're hoping the SEAL program will support both Chatham and Harwich, just like the ISLE program at Harwich supports both Chatham and Harwich students. So we want to make sure that that happens, and that is in the budget. We already have a 0.5 teacher at Chatham Elementary, and we're going to move her to a 1.0. Speech services, I just wanted to illustrate, that's also a moving target, and I do get worried about the intensity of services that our students have. So we have all the preschool students at Harwich Elementary. We have 2 speech pathologists. One of them solely, well, not solely, but predominantly works with the preschool. And of course, as those numbers increase, so does the caseload for that one person. And at Chatham Elementary, we have a 0.5 budgeted. She works 0.4. My worry about that always is that I feel like sometimes it shortchanges the flexibility to serve kids the way we need to. And because it's prescribed, because they only can come in the 2 days. So I'm very cognizant of that, and I want to pay attention to that. And if the numbers continue to increase at Harwich, then my worry is that person can't keep adding on to their caseload as well. So I just wanted to point that out, that we do need to just pay attention to that. 0.5 support for the nurse leader. We do have a grant that we received that will offset that 0.5, but part of the grant and part of the nurse leader requirements is that they do work 50% as a nurse leader, meaning they're going into the other buildings, they're supporting the nurses, they're checking in, making sure the regulatory requirements are in place, that our health records are, where they're supposed to be. So we will be adding that 0.5. So, and then I just have listed some concerns. So we do have the mental health coordinator. Right now it's supported through ESSER. We have that position through next year. There are certainly grants that I will be looking at next year, as I have in the past. I did not write any this year because, part of the issue is you can't hire anyone. So it's great if you have money, but if you can't hire anyone, it's really pretty difficult, to manage a grant without people. So next year, I'm hoping that there are some additional grants that we can look forward to supplementing that mental health coordinator. Currently, our BCBA contract, because it is a contracted service, it's very costly because I have to go through an agency. So, we're spending a significant amount of money for 25 hours a week. Versus if, at some point, if we think about hiring a BCBA full-time, that would certainly be far more cost-effective, and we would get more for our dollar. So again, future consideration. The counselor at high school and HES are currently funded through ESSER, so we need to keep that in our consideration for 2025. And then the last thing was the way our PLCs run right now, our professional learning communities, there are leaders that, run those PLCs, and we don't have one for our intensive teachers. And when they go to the kind of the special education, where the special education teachers are, they're talking about curriculum and they're talking about design, our intensive teachers are talking far more, about modification and levels of creativity to, develop programs for kids. So it doesn't really match, so they're kind of on their own. So just, again, it's not budgeted, but something I really want to think about to maximize their time and skills. And then finally, I believe our programs are incredibly strong. We continually get calls asking if, we tuition kids in to the programs, but, my thing at this point is we really need to focus on our kids and our programs, and we have a very, very low out-of-district enrollment compared to other schools because of our strong programs. And then, of course, the effective use of our consultants as well. And then just thinking about always strengthening and ensuring our efficient, I know I use those words all the time, efficiency and effectiveness, that's key for me, but making sure that we're continually strengthening those infrastructures for our programs. And thank you, and happy to take questions.
Questions to Wilson? Ms. Gates?
Yeah, just a clarification on the future considerations. So it says maintain counselor at HS and HES. Is that adjustment counselor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Excellent presentation. Thank you so much for all the
Thank you.
information.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the regional agreement removing obsolete language, improving clarity, and addressing vacancies. We do have a vote for this one. Oh, no, excuse me, not for that one. No, that's actually for student activity camp.
Want me to
Yeah, do
take
you
it?
want to do that next, Carpenter?
Sure. So in your packet, there are three things. There's everyone's favorite, the side-by-side that has the current regional agreement as voted upon at last year's town meetings with the proposed changes. There's a clean copy of the regional agreement if you ever are so bored and want to read it from one end to the other on what it would read with the proposed changes in it. And then one other little piece of paper on a state statute that I'll circle back to here at the end. So at the end of the side-by-side document, the very last page has a one-pager that sort of summarizes all of the changes. So I'll just kind of walk you through what those are, but essentially what the regional agreement is doing is it's removing old language and obsolete language and inserting the word Monomoy, because when the regional agreement was initially done, and remember, last year we addressed all things fiscal, but we did not touch, just because the markup would be all over the place in terms of trying to insert Monomoy, we wanted to just focus people on just the financial pieces, and that we said that we would come back this coming year to clean up everything obsolete. So the word Monomoy doesn't appear in the original. It would refer to this committee as the Regional District School Committee. So in the document, every time it says that, I have changed it to be Monomoy Regional School Committee. That happens 42 times in this document. Select Board is inserted instead of Selectmen. That happens 10 times. There are places in the document where it says Monomoy Regional Schools or it would say Regional Schools or Regional District, and now it says Monomoy Regional School or Monomoy Regional District. That happens 10 times. There's once in the document where it talks about the town of Chatham and talks about the elementary. It now says Chatham Elementary. And Harwich, it says the elementary. It says Harwich Elementary, and there's a reference to what is currently our middle school, but references it as the combined middle high school, which it now no longer is. It's now Monomoy Regional Middle School. So the bulk of the changes are that. There's one other change that we will be proposing, and that's the second one, which is to clear up a reference that doesn't make sense. So there is a section under assessment on a section which is section 9, and it says under the debt service clause, it says debt service costs attributable to the high school and middle school will be assessed to the member towns using the 3-year rolling average of each member's town's foundation enrollment as described, and it lists as described in section 9A, 3A2. Well, the way it describes the calculation is right, but what it's directing you to doesn't, like, it's directing to something that isn't that calculation. So we're just correcting what, if you want to say, go to a section that follows a 3-year rolling average of each member town's foundation enrollment, the correct reference should be section 9B1. So it's that one change. It doesn't fiscally change anything. It just points the document to the right reference. At the table at our last school committee meeting, there was a very good idea raised on how to deal with vacancies. And, because over my time here, and, there have been a number of times, either in Harwich or Chatham, where a member has been unable to serve out their full term, and we've had to go have the members of the school committee for the particular town where the vacancy is and the town's select board meet, and they'll solicit applications as they're doing currently for the vacancy that we have in Chatham, and appoint. And the appointment has been for the end of a member's, the appointment has been till the next, or the upcoming annual town meeting, which doesn't allow the person to kind of get as much experience and creates more of a, it has the potential to create more turnover within the committee than ideal. And I think, the friendly suggestion when we last met was, shouldn't it be instead of until the next town meeting, but through the members, through the vacant openings term, the remainder of the term. So we bounced this off legal counsel. While it's a great idea, apparently there is a state statute, which is Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 11, that basically dictates how vacancies on any board need to operate, which is basically, the long and short of it is the appointment can only be until the next town meeting. So great idea, but I will go into the document and just change what I call the purple clause, because I highlighted in purple. I'll go back to the original wording. So we will not be having the number 3 there. It'll just be the changes to number 1 and the redirection on assessment, and that's the sum total of the document. And there's a whole bunch of lines in there that just remove obsolete clauses. So like there was the last several pages of the regional agreement all dealt with the transition to making the school district, which we've gone through that. So there are sections that are lined out that just deal with the transitional pieces, those are sort of lined out, and you have all the appropriate renumbering and relettering. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Carpenter. I just want to let the committee know also that the regional agreement, we're kind of an ad hoc committee, we're not really a subcommittee, but we did meet and did review the document as changed, which is what we also, Tina provided what we were hoping to have some adjustments to the vacancies. So we did meet and we reviewed the document, and a lot of it is simply just changing the names. And Dr. Carpenter, just remind me of the timing of this. This would be technically a first reading. Is there a need that we have to push a vote through tonight, or can this wait till the next meeting to vote the draft?
So in terms of the time, I don't think it's necessary to have this board vote before we take it to the towns to start discussing it. But Michael and I know how to have fun, so Valentine's Day evening, to save money, we go every year, it seems, to Chatham Select Board. So we will be saving money and going to the Chatham Select Board on Valentine's Day to discuss our budget, but it's a twofer. We want to make sure that we don't have to go out to dinner on Valentine's evening. We will also be discussing the regional agreement changes that night too. So we're doing that on the 14th. I do not believe we meet before the 14th. But as I said, what we're talking about changing isn't anything, that's I think gonna create and ruffle any feathers. We'll be doing the exact same thing February 28th before the Harwich Board. So we're on both of their calendars.
Ms. James.
Just have a couple of questions, if you don't mind, going back to this Mass General Law. So what I am hearing is, so it references annual town meeting, and our regional agreement says election. Those are two different events. So the annual town meeting for Harwich is always the first Monday of May. I don't know for Chatham. And then the election for Harwich is always, I think, the second. Anyway, I guess the point I'm making is that depending on how our meetings land in May, annual town meeting is one thing, an election is another. So does that mean, does that mean like if there's a meeting that falls between those two events, that person just doesn't come and they're not official? I mean, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I know you're not the attorney, but I'm just,
I would paraphrase our attorney and say that I think the intent is that it runs until that annual town meeting. However, it best, I think if the election happens after, then it would, go that extra week. But but I think the intent is just that it's not if someone steps off and there's 2 years remaining in the term, that there can't be a 2-year appointment. It has to only be until that next May.
Okay. All right, that's fine. It just specifically says annual town meeting, and our regional agreement says election. So to me, those are two different things. Or until another is qualified, and I would like to, I'm assuming that means sworn in, but I don't know. I don't know what that means, but, okay.
Dr. Carpenter, can we just get some more clarification on Ms. Deems before our next meeting when we vote on it?
Sure. And we can, I can ask council if they would recommend that we change the wording in the agreement to be consistent with
The law.
with
Yeah.
the law. I think the reality is it initially went through DESI and had approval, so I think I think if we send the agreement as it currently is to DESI, they're not going to flag it.
But if we change it.
What the attorney said is if we do the purple clause and put that in, there's a good chance that DESI would flag it and say, this
Right.
violates state statute, can't happen.
Right. And all that is fine. I guess I'm just foreseeing if we ever had a meeting, I guess that, and thank you for clarifying with the attorney, because let's just say we have a meeting on, I don't know, May 6th. So, and then Harwich has had their annual town meeting, but then maybe Chatham had, I don't know. I just don't want somebody sitting and making votes that might be illegal.
Well, I think the important thing is that until that election happens and the person's sworn in on the other side, that's for us the time that they can be at the table. And, so even if there's an appointment, there still has to have that process that happens
Okay.
with the town
All
clerk
right.
before they can be here at the table.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Gaines. As I read it, it says, shall perform the duties of the office until the next annual meeting or until another is qualified, but defining qualified
Right.
is
Does
when
that mean
someone's sworn in,
sworn
because
in?
they could wait 3 days and the other person could still do 2 subcommittees or whatever it
Yeah.
is. So if
Yeah.
we can have some qualifying details about what qualified
Qualified
is,
means.
that would be great. All right, that would technically be our first reading, and then we'll bring this back at our next meeting to push it through. Next item on the agenda is new student activity account, Sale Cafe. Michael McMillan, Business Manager, welcome back.
Thank you very much. So, we've come a couple of times already this year about getting your approval to set up a student activity account. That's when we have an account to help manage students' funds for activities. This one is for the high school sale program, which Melissa spoke about earlier. They want to run a sort of a cafe where they will sell tea and coffee and hot chocolate to staff and use those funds for real life experiences for the students. So we just need an account to manage those funds.
Fantastic. Ms. Henderson?
I would like to make the motion to approve the creation of a student activity account for the high school sale cafe.
In a second?
I second that.
And we'll roll call. Ms. Stout? Ms. Stout? Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Ms. Gray?
Aye.
Ms. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Henderson?
Aye.
Sharon? Sharon, we're doing a roll call for the motion.
Roll call for the motion?
Aye.
And the chair is
Can
an
you hear
aye.
me?
Yep.
Aye.
Thank you. And the chair is an aye. All right, next item on the agenda is just the FY24 budget public hearing recap. We had a budget hearing this evening, or do you want to do the recap, or do you want me to do the recap?
You can do it. I'll just do it if you need me.
No, I was just going to report out that we had a budget hearing this evening at 6 o'clock here in the library, prior to our meeting, which started at 7:30, for an hour and a half, where Michael presented another eloquent proposal for the budget for FY24. We had members of the Harwich Selectmen here and other representatives of the town that were active in commenting and asking questions. And the board also had an opportunity to have further inquiry with Michael if they had any questions or needed anything clarified. I thought it was very productive, and we got a lot of compliments on, again, the clarity and the transparency and the opportunities we've given the public with a lot of information and a lot of detail, including our workshop, which incorporated our principals and their needs and wants for the district. So unless anyone else has anything to add, I thought it was great and successful, and I appreciate everyone contributing to that as well, and I think it's important. So thank you very much. And next item on the agenda, subcommittee reports, Portrait of the Graduate Development Team update.
So the Portrait of the Graduate Development Team had what we were affectionately calling our final meeting yesterday. I'm sure that the group will get back together to, just to discuss and give feedback to the graphic designer. But we're at the place where the concept that we pulled together have coalesced around some bigger themes, and so we will be bringing at, I suspect, after February vacation, we'll be at a place where we'll have more to bring back in terms of some graphic designs, and I suspect that the 2 school committee meetings out will have a presentation from the group on a finalized graphic design for it. But I really appreciate all of the people that have been participating in this, and you can imagine that we started with 60-some different mindsets and dispositions that people felt would be important, and they were sort of taking those and sort of bringing them into fewer themes that we can focus on as a district and make headway. The themes that were really coming out yesterday were themes centered around inner strength and developing sort of confidence in individuals, to have themes related to developing an individual's integrity while they're with us, and themes related to developing relationship skills and communication skills, and then themes related to the skills we'll call it the more traditional academic skills that that school districts work on, but with a special focus that really was on creativity, civics, critical thinking. So I appreciate as well that the members of the development team would come. They do their homework and come and with some ideas on how can we take what everyone was talking about and come up with with some synergy. And one of our members, Martha Stevens, who's a retiree living in Chatham, came with an idea that I think resonated with everyone, and it was nice to see last night where everybody's starting to, yes, we can see how we can get there, and so I suspect that what we'll see is something that along the lines of sort of a nautical compass theme, with these 4 areas situated around a compass in some beautifully graphically displayed way. So to come, but thanks to everybody that's been involved in that, and it was and special thanks to Martha for bringing such I think a focused idea forward.
Thank you, Dr. Carpenter. And I think we just have one brief subcommittee update from Ms. Henderson.
So the superintendent evaluation subcommittee met today. One of the pieces of the superintendent evaluation is that about mid-year we have a formative assessment meeting to kind of see where Dr. Carpenter is as far as his goals are concerned. And he gave us a pretty detailed picture of where he is, and we will bring back the specifics so that you have it in a document to see in front of you at our next meeting to further discuss.
Inquire.
Yes.
Great, thank you. And action items, we do have a vote required for the student trip to Italy proposal we received last week for February of 2024. Do I have a motion? Ms. Henderson?
I would like to make a motion to approve the international trip to Italy for next February 2024.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, and a roll call vote? Oh, wait, I'm sorry, Ms. Gaines, questions?
Oh, no. I was just waving.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The second
For
was
the
good?
second,
Okay. And a roll call vote, Ms. Stout?
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, Ms. Gaines. Oh, no. I was just waving. Oh, yeah. Okay, for the second, okay. And a roll call vote, Ms. Stout? Oh, aye.
Aye.
Ms. Gaines, thank you. Ms. Gray?
Aye.
Ms. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Henderson?
Aye.
And the chair is an aye. We've had the presentations of the warrants
Chair?
tonight. And the superintendent's report, I skipped right over. Sorry.
That's okay. It's not the first time, I'm sure, but no.
Not the first time I thought about it.
Let's see, yesterday was the Harwich Housing Huddle, and I thought the town did a nice job of pulling that together. And and I understand there'll be housing conversations to be had in Chatham here upcoming. So So I think, as Julie Kavanaugh brought up, I think housing is an underlying issue that's behind a lot of, these increases that we're seeing, and I think it's something that, that we're going to have to deal with as a district. And I thought there were a number of people that were, bringing up, up good ideas, but I think it's things that are bigger than just a school committee or superintendents to go and figure out solutions for.
Thank you, I'm so sorry. All right, we've had the presentation of the warrants, God bless you, and I would welcome a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second,
Second.
and we will roll call out. Ms. Stout? Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Ms. Gray?
Aye.
Ms. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Henderson?
Aye.
And the chair is an aye, and I heard Sharon say aye. Meeting adjourned at 8:23.